So welcome. My name is Kristen Iris Johnson, and today we're going to be talking about compromise, which I think is an interesting subject as a person who is creative, but also helps people on a personal level in terms of making change in their lives and how compromise kind of plays out differently in your creative work versus your personal life. So we're going to talk today about compromise and also how to turn compromise or see compromise as new opportunities when it comes to your creative work. So again, my name is Kristen Iris Johnson. I am a film producer, a writer, and a pleasure activist. And aside from writing and producing, I also help writers and filmmakers, make the best story that they can and give a little guidance there, as well as in general for writers, Black writers and creatives. I teach them how to use pleasure as a way of amplifying their creativity and their impact, right? Because a lot of us, Black creatives, Black writers, we are doing the work that we're doing because we want to make an impact. And this is actually a really important part to what I'm going to be talking about today, because when I think about wanting to make an impact and wanting to write certain kinds of stories and produce certain kinds of stories, if I'm only thinking about wanting to do certain kinds of stories and certain kinds of things, it actually limits my ability to get to that level. Right? So if I want to write something that is more subversive, that is out of the norm, that is going to push the envelope, but I'm let's say I'm a nobody in the industry, and I've never written anything, let's say I've never written anything, nothing's been produced, I haven't done any producing, there's a whole new script. It's not that I can't write that, but thinking that that's going to be the next thing out of the gates is not necessarily the most realistic thing, right? So it's if there's an opportunity, for example, let's say I want to write this really epic fantasy, Black centered fantasy or sci-fi or something like that, because I love fantasy and sci-fi. Let's say I have this vision of these certain kinds of stories or this certain kind of story that I want to write. That may not be the next thing that I can write that gets produced. It's got fantasy sci-fi have much bigger budgets. They're expensive. They tend to be just more massive. But me, let's say me as someone, if I had not ever written anything, I'd never produced anything, I'd never been on a film set, didn't have any connections, then expecting someone to invest millions of dollars into a project when they don't really know me as a writer is unrealistic, right? So then how do you get to that point, right? So I'm not at that point. I have ideas for stuff that I want to write, but I'm not at that point of producing that kind of stuff. But where I am is in a place where I have opportunities to write other kinds of stories and content that is going to help put me on the map, that can still kind of bring a different view or a different voice to the screen. And maybe it's not the kind of stuff that I would normally write, but it's something that is going to create opportunity. Okay, so that's something that you can think about is I want to do this, I want to create this, I want to put this out there, especially when it comes to film. Film is a collaborative process. If you want to write a book that is whatever the heck it is you want to write, you can go ahead and do that. You could self-publish it. That is much easier to do now than it was 20 years ago, right? But because you're writing, as screenwriters, we are writing something that is a collaborative process that has a director coming in, that has producers coming in, that might have a network coming in. It's got talent coming in, and everybody being part of this creative process that the script is the skeleton for. You have to be willing to give a little bit, right? Especially with people in industry that know more than you do. And that doesn't mean you necessarily have to give everything. It doesn't mean that you can't fight for certain things, but it means that in general, you have to be willing to give a little when it comes to what you're writing, because there are so many other people. But even within that, in terms of using that, that compromise becomes an opportunity, because as a screenwriter, if you're not willing to give it all on your script, if you're not willing to take anyone else's ideas or anyone else's input, your story will not get made, because there are too many other people that are part of the creative process for you to hold that tightly to it that you will not let anybody else's creativity flow through it as well, right? And so that's one of the ways that compromise becomes an opportunity, that it's not just oh, I'm compromising. It's, oh, I'm taking these other people's their suggestions, their feedback, and thinking of it as hey, they're making this better. sometimes that's actually what's happening, is they're making it better. Sometimes it is a compromise. Sometimes you're like, hey, I really want this character to be black. And they're like, we want to make her Asian. And like, maybe you can give on that so that the story can still be put on screen. So that's one example of where compromise may come in. Compromise can also come in terms of like the kind of story that you're writing. So like I said, there's certain kinds of stories that I want to write that are not super feasible right now because they're expensive. They're going to cost more money. But for me to get to that level where I will be able to produce that kind of content, because I am a producer, where I could write that content all day, but for me to actually get to the level where I can produce it or connect with the people who can get it produced, then I might have to write other things. So like, for example, this year I wrote a suspense thriller because thrillers are popular. People are asking for them. Networks want thrillers. So I was like, okay, I don't really write thriller, but like, I could do this. Like, yeah, let me stretch myself, like sometimes even that, like compromise. It's like, I don't really write that, but I can write that. That's also stretching my skill into like a new genre of writing. So okay, I don't really write that. So I was like, let me get this idea for this suspense thriller. And because I'm me and I have trouble not doing anything fantastical, it ended up being a supernatural suspense thriller. But it's good. It's something that is feasible to shoot in the next like 2 years. And that is my way of like, okay, now I have this suspense thriller. Got a little supernatural in it because I can't help myself. But now I have this suspense thriller that is ready and that is available. That is something that I can put out now. That is something that I could pitch now. If there are networks that are like, yo, we're looking for a suspense thriller, I got you, boo. Check this out. This shit is so good, right? But I have something instead of like, but don't you want to do an epic fantasy starring black people? Like, be like, girl, we don't even know you. You want us to give you $20 million? Like, are you crazy? Right? But now I have this other thing that I've written that is still something that I actually really like and involved me stretching my skill. And now it's ready and it can be pitched. And that is something that if that gets produced, I'm going to say when that gets produced, because it's definitely going to get produced. When that gets produced, I got to work with that confidence, right? So when that gets produced, that is a piece of my writing and my producing that is out there that is going to pave the way for new opportunities to eventually get to writing the sci-fi or producing the sci-fi and the fantasy that I really want to be doing, right? So there's all kinds of ways in which you can take a compromise or something that may feel like a compromise and see it instead as an opportunity or as an opportunity to do something new, or like a way to expand even your skill set. So Dana said they can help you ultimately expand. Yeah, so like when you do that, when you get feedback, it can help you to expand. Even just taking like being like, okay, let me write something new. Like, all right, like I don't really do romantic comedies, but let's say romantic comedies are in demand. All right, so okay, let me write a romantic comedy. Let's say nobody even takes it, but you still have a romantic comedy if somebody wants it. You've got something that can be pitched, and now you're diversifying your portfolio. Basically, you're diversifying what you have that people may want to produce. And anytime that something that you make gets produced, that paves the way. That brings you up a little bit more and up a little bit more, and that paves the way for creating new opportunities, for writing different kinds of projects, for even having a little bit more of like, okay, I'm going to push it a little bit more with this project. I'm going to have this message with this project. Like you get to do a little bit more and weave more of that in when you start taking things that you may see as a compromise and turn it into an opportunity. Now, what I find interesting about compromise and like opportunity, or about compromise, what I find interesting about compromise is like the way people feel. And I'll use myself as an example, is like when it comes to your creative work, people get like really, really like grippy around their creative work. Like, I don't want to change this. I don't want to listen to this feedback. I don't want to, I don't want to compromise. I don't want to collaborate, right? But then in their personal lives, it's like there are people who are compromising left and right, compromising their integrity, compromising to their own detriment. So like personal life, it's like you're compromising to your detriment. Like this toxic person might be here, this toxic job, this toxic situation, or like I'm doing this thing that I really don't want to do because I feel like I have an obligation. That's a big one amongst Black people, is feeling like you have an obligation to care for or do certain things. But then when it comes to our creative work, it's like, no, I'm not compromising. I'm not changing anything. And so we have to, like, for me, for example, I had to learn that balance. Like, I had to learn how to stop compromising in my personal life. I had to learn how to stop taking shit and dealing with people's shit and just being able to like stand up for myself in a different way and stand in integrity with like who I am. Despite like whatever like abuses might have been coming my way, I had to learn how to pull back and stop compromising. And then in my creative work as a writer, as a person who was like, but this is my baby. What do you mean? Do you want me to change this? You know, like as someone who was like that, I have had to learn how to relinquish some of that and learn to compromise and also collaborate more in my writing, especially because, like I said, screenwriting is a collaborative process. And there's a lot of people that are part of that creative process. I'm really, really glad that I actually came into film on the producing side, even though I had done a lot of writing already. Actually coming professionally into film was on the producing side. And I'm really glad about that, because learning and understanding how producing works, it's like, oh, you really have to be open to working with the people around you, or you will not get work and people will not produce your stuff. Had I come into and taken like writing and then tried to pitch and try to like work with production companies, I would have been so tight with like what I wanted to do. And it's like, well, that's not the character. Well, that's not the story. Well, that's not the blah, 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 right? But that's not, hey, Lynette, but that's not going to get the story made. That's going to get me looked at as like a difficult person who's not willing to collaborate, who's not willing to like work with other people, and then nobody's going to want to work with me as a writer. It would have ruined my writing career before it even started. But I didn't. I started on the producing side and got to understand like, oh, this is really how this, like how much of a collaboration it is like you really have to be willing to take other people's feedback and understand that like, there may be things that you're like, I don't want to compromise on this, but I will, because it's going to help get this story made. And it's still an important story. It's still going to be out there and it's still going to impact people, or it's still going to create other opportunities for me. You might be compromising on stuff that you don't want to, but you know that it's actually going to serve your best interest for this story to still go out there and for what that can create for you as future opportunities. So if you're someone who's like that, it's like thinking about that. Are you someone who like you compromise a lot in your personal life, and then when it comes to your creative work, you're like, no, I want it to be like my way? It's like practicing and learning really how to like relinquish some of that control. It is still a practice for me. I am not like all the way there. Like I still get really like, but I want it this way. I got a vision. How come y'all aren't in my vision? What the fuck, right? And then it's like, back it up, because we all got a vision and we're all part of this creative process. So just like loosen it up and work with other people's vision, because they can also make your story better. Like that has happened. I've done script reviews for people. I have helped develop stories for people or with people or for people, both. But like the things that come out of it when you have other people and other people's views, it really does expand and enhance the story. So you got to be willing to like, slow your roll. Dana, slow your roll. You got to be real slow and just be like, whoa, let me just like pull it back and let me see what this person's saying. Like get out of my damn feelings about it and see what this person's saying and see what we can actually like create together and how we can like weave it together. Right. So that compromise, like I said, I'm putting this in quotes because sometimes it's not a compromise. Sometimes it's just like collaboration. Sometimes it's just taking feedback and really using it. But like this idea of like compromising your creative work, not necessarily. You can see that as an opportunity. You can see it as a way of collaborating, as a way of learning, as a way of trying new things. And you can see it as a way of, all right, this isn't really what I had envisioned right now, but it's okay, because this going out there is gonna put me closer to being able to put the stuff that I really do envision. And that is really important, because it's the long game. Especially for those of us who are writing, who have like messages, or we have things like we want to write deeper stuff that like really shares certain viewpoints or changes viewpoints, or is something that's unconventional, you're putting yourself on a path to be able to write and produce that kind of stuff. So hope this is helpful for you guys. Now, speaking of writing story, if you have not gotten it yet, I do have a free video training. It's kind of short, a free video training called 3 Keys to Writing a Stellar Story, or 3 Keys to Writing a Powerful Story. It's for book and script writers. You can get it at kristeniris.com/3, the number 3 keys, or you can hit the link in my bio if you're on Instagram. So go ahead and hit the link in my bio. You can go and download it free. Well, actually, you don't even have to download it. You just, when you sign up, you get instant access to the video training, and it will help you to work through, again, the 3 key elements to like really writing a powerful story that makes sense, that draws in your reader, or in your mind's eye, your viewer would draw in your viewer, so that you can actually get your, if it's a script, get your script produced and like hook the people who really need to be hooked. And then people will be like clamoring for more of your work, right? I love it. So thank you guys for joining me. And if you are watching on the replay, thanks for watching on the replay. I will see you guys on the next live.